Hurston Waldrep is not coming back in 2026, which narrows Atlanta's path to find their 27 outs in October. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on into Braves Today, a production of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, author of the Braves Today newsletter over at bravestoday.com. In just a minute, I want to talk about the loss to the Yankees, the series loss. You lose 2-1. I think there's positive and negative to take away from that, and I think it's worthy of a conversation. We don't typically do a lot of post-series recaps on this show, but I think it's warranted in this case. But before we do that, in case you missed the news from over the weekend, Hurston Waldrep was in Gwinnett on Saturday to clean out his locker. And, teammates were talking to him, A.J. Smith-Shawver, J.R. Ritchie, whatever, looking at his elbow and things like that. Typically, when a guy cleans out his locker in season, that's a pretty good sign he's not coming back, right? We have reports at the major league level. Spencer Strider had already cleaned out his locker. He's not due back this season. He later confirmed at a public event to a Braves fan that he wasn't coming back this year, but we're going to add Hurston Waldrep to that list. And so it's a little bit slimmer of a path in October to find your 27 outs if you don't have the ability to throw that Hurston Waldrep splitter at the problem. And I want to be clear real quick on what we do and don't know about this Hurston Waldrep situation. So we do not know, from what I understand, he's not had surgery yet. And we do not know if there is a surgery in his future, right? We don't know what he's destined for. If they think this is a Tommy John situation, if they think it's something less than that, if it's another bone spur, if it's just rest and rehab, we don't know. But cleaning out the locker is the sign that more likely than not, we're not going to see him the rest of this year. And now I think you probably the smart thing to do is to take him off of your list of potential rotation options in 2027 until we get more clarity from the Braves. Last update that we officially got on Hurston Waldrep is he was pursuing some other opinions on his right elbow and what to do. And typically that means not good things, right? You don't get second opinions if your elbow's fine. So I don't want to speculate. I don't want to go out there and say, oh, this is probably this or that or the other. But I don't think it sounds promising for the Braves. And there's a couple things to take away from this breaking news of Hurston Waldrep. I think the first thing is one less option for October. And I've written about this a little bit over at Braves Today. I've talked about Alex's approach to the trade deadline and how so many of the options that we wanted, right, a Casey Mize or whoever it might be, didn't have very good stuff and ability to miss bats. And so it was clear that the cost did not match what they thought they could receive in October. So go check that out. And then I've also written about a couple guys who I think are going to be important in that search for 27 outs, right? Didier Fuentes was in that original Alex Anthopoulos article, dropped a big, long piece I'm pretty proud of, actually, on Monday morning about Dylan Dodd, so go check that out as well. But I think the big takeaway for me here, outside of the October conversation, right, because A.J. Smith-Shawver could be part of that, Spencer Schwellenbach could be part of that, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, is the idea that the Braves, from a training staff perspective and a medical perspective, are doing things wrong with their young pitchers. And I think in this situation, two things can be true at once, right? I think thing number one is pitcher injuries are unavoidable. And in the modern game, a modern game that is so focused on spin and velocity, you're going to have catastrophic elbow injuries. It's going to happen. And the people, I don't mean this derogatorily, and I apologize if it comes off that way. The people who think this is uniquely a Braves problem have not necessarily paid enough attention to other teams and their farm systems. This is a baseball problem. And it's not even an MLB problem. It's a baseball problem. We are getting to the point where a surprising number of drafted prep pitchers have already had Tommy John when they're getting drafted. This is an issue in the game, a game that prioritizes velocity and spin. And I would almost argue that those things have become a prerequisite. Baseball America, J.J. Cooper, the managing editor of Baseball America, editor-in-chief, did a really good study late last year on the connection between velocity and longevity for MLB pitchers. And the takeaway from that study was if you throw harder than normal, you're more likely to have success, you're more likely to have a better peak to your career, and you're more likely to have durability and a longer MLB career if you throw soft. Like if you're throwing 88, 90 miles an hour, whatever. The reason for that, and this is exclusively MLB, the reason for that is not because throwing harder keeps you healthy. The reason for that is throwing softer keeps you from making the league. Guys who don't throw hard just don't make it to Major League Baseball anymore. Yes, there are exceptions. I know you can name names of exceptions like a Martin Perez, like a Ranger Suarez, guys that are good like Suarez, who just got a massive contract, who don't throw very hard. But they're more the exception versus the rule. Think of this. Think of the idea of telling an MLB pitcher to throw softer, kind of like telling a race car driver, hey, you'll reduce your risk of crashing by driving slowly. Yeah, you might crash less often, but you're more likely to get replaced by a faster driver. That's what velocity is in Major League Baseball. So, thing number one is there's not any great way to take velocity out of the game. It's there. It is becoming a prerequisite to make the league. And because of that focus on velocity, that focus on spin, guys are going to get hurt. At the same time, I have been told by multiple different people that maybe Atlanta's training staff hasn't necessarily handled these injuries the right way. And that some of the players themselves, and I'm not going to name names, but some of the players themselves have been frustrated with the discussions about the injuries, how they've been communicated, how they've been handled. So it's entirely possible you do see some sort of shakeup in the medical staff. You're still going to have injuries. And I do think we need to moderate our expectations on if that happens. These arm injuries are going to be part of baseball until they figure out something that is better and safer for your elbow than throwing a baseball. The worst thing you can do as a pitcher to your body is pitch. It's a terrible thing to do on your body. It's not a very natural motion. There's a reason softball pitchers can go a lot more often and a lot more pitches than a baseball pitcher, and it's because that's a more natural motion, even though, like in my head, it feels like throwing underhand like they do is a less natural motion than throwing overhand. But the specific way in which you do it ends up being a more natural thing on your body. So, there you go. And I don't necessarily think you can tell these guys to stop throwing hard. I just don't think it's sustainable. I don't think it's going to lead them to be successful. I don't think it's going to keep them healthier. These injuries are going to happen. Maybe making changes in the training staff can help with how they recover from the injuries and take care of some of the more preventable ones where a guy who is compromised is given the opportunity to keep pitching. I don't know. But the good news we have on, like, again, we're not going to get Hurston Waldrep back, but we may possibly get Spencer Schwellenbach. He's back in Atlanta. As of the end of July, he had thrown multiple bullpens in Florida. And the update from Walt Weiss was this was as of July 31st, he needed to throw 3 more bullpens and then start facing live hitters. Now, we don't know what was actually done. We don't know if he threw those bullpens or if he didn't. So I don't have any more information on that. But you could easily see how 3 bullpens, you start facing some live hitters, and then rehabbing by mid to late August could give him the opportunity to make a start in the majors before the postseason. I don't want to count on Spencer Schwellenbach, right? You can't assume you're going to have him, but if he's able to return even in a limited role, even in a bullpen role, work as an opener, something like that, it goes a long way towards helping you find those 27 outs. A similar note, Joe Jimenez has a locker. Although I've been told he's now in Florida doing rehab. I don't know if that means he's getting ready to start a rehab assignment. He had previously not even been in Florida. He had been, from what I was told, he'd been in New York City rehabbing with the doctors who did his surgery. So the fact that he's in Florida, with the organization at the facility, again, you can't count on anything from Joe Jimenez, but there's a possibility you may have those guys coming down the pipe. Doesn't absolve the Braves of not finding upgrades at the trade deadline, but maybe it helps you figure out these 27 outs in October. Speaking of October, the weekend series against the Yankees felt like a postseason series. Holy cow. Let's talk about the good and the bad from that. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Braves dropped the series to the Yankees 2-1. All 3 of them were one-run games, right? Braves lose the opener 2-1 in. Braves lose the opener 5-4 in extras. Braves lose the opener 3-2 in extras. They had a lead late. Raisel Iglesias gives up 2 runs in the 9th inning. There are a lot of people who are concerned about Raisel Iglesias. I think the one thing I'll say here is the Braves have been very, very good when they are leading after 8 innings. Like 60-2 when leading after 8 innings. And he's blown a total of 3 saves on the year. Now, 2 of them have been in the last couple weeks. I acknowledge that. But I don't think you need to make a change for Raisel Iglesias. Every reliever just about has a small stumble during the season. There's like a 2-week period every year where Raisel Iglesias is not good. Last year, it ended up being a month, right? They temporarily took him out of the closer role because he had a homer issue on the slider, and he fixed it by just pretty much stop throwing the slider. He's blown 2 saves in the last couple weeks. I still don't think Raisel Iglesias is a problem for the Braves. But that is Friday night. You lose in extras 3-2. Part of the issue there is you don't score in extra innings. And that's not sustainable. Like, you have to be able to score in extras, and road teams in extras actually do okay. But with Austin Riley on second, you had a ground out to short, runner didn't advance. You had a ground out to first, which did move the runner to third, and then you had an infield pop out to end the inning. You got the runner to third, you didn't bring him in, and you lost. Game 2, and that game had other weird stuff too, right? There was the Ozzie getting thrown out at third base in the first inning, and Drake Baldwin not having a chance to score before Ozzie got tagged out, so the run didn't count. Game 2, you had the balk called on Chris Sale. Really kind of obviously a dumb situation. For those of you who missed it, Chris Sale had a runner on third, and his normal delivery, wind up or stretch, has a little like step in it that could be interpreted as a balk. The home plate umpire called him for the balk on the second batter he faced with a runner on third. And the crew chief after the game said he was called for the balk because whenever you have a runner on base and you are what's called a hybrid pitcher, meaning you throw from both the windup and the stretch at different times, you have to declare when a runner is on base and you would normally be in the stretch, you have to declare that you are pitching from the windup. And according to the crew chief, he declared for the first batter and didn't redeclare for the second batter. And to be clear, that's never really been a thing that guys have been required to do. Chris Sale didn't know he had to do it. And the balk directly resulted in a run scoring. And that inning went on, and there was more that happened. He probably would have scored anyway. The number 9 hitter ended up doubling and everything. But the point is, it was a disruption to the inning, and the Braves, ended up losing the game. They lost the lead in that inning, and they just never got it back. And then they won a pitching duel in Game 3. They get a home run in the 7th inning from Matt Olson to take a 1-0 lead. The Yankees get that run back with a Trent Grisham homer in the 8th. They go to extras. The Braves score 1 in the top half of the inning and then hold New York off the board. And I've talked to a lot of people that are encouraged by this series. I've talked to a lot of people who are discouraged by this series. And I think we should probably unpack it a little bit because it felt like a postseason series from a lot of perspectives. One, credit to the Yankees. They always do a great job of packing the ballpark. Old Timers Day being on Saturday definitely helped. But the atmosphere in the ballpark was a playoff atmosphere for the most part. The pitching matchups were really, really good. The Braves got the 3 best pitchers for the Yankees. They faced old friend Max Fried on Friday. First time Fried had faced the Braves since he left. I did not realize that until the game was going on. But it was Tyler Mahle versus Max Fried. Tyler Mahle was amazing. 3 hits, no runs across 6 innings, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts. So he stepped up and matched Max Fried blow for blow. Max Fried allowed 3 hits in 6 1/3, no runs, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. So depending on what's more important, you could argue that Mahle outdueled Fried. Game 2 was Chris Sale versus Garrett Cole. Another fantastic battle. They combined for 17 strikeouts and I think 2 walks across 13 innings. And then Sunday was Grant Holmes versus Cam Schlittler. Holmes gave the Braves 6 scoreless innings. Schlittler allowed the 1 run on 3 hits across 7. He did strike out 11. So, he clearly had the strikeout advantage over Grant Holmes' 2, but Holmes came out of the outing with no runs allowed. So, if you want to call it a wash, you can call it a wash, whatever. The point is, the starting pitching was fantastic. And Atlanta's relief pitching, other than Iglesias in the 9th on Friday, was pretty decent too. For the series, the Yankees went 3 for 25 with runners in scoring position. So, not good. The Braves had 6 hits in, I think it was 21. So they went 6 for 21 for Atlanta. And all in all, it really felt like the pitching staff, again, in a postseason environment, on the road, hostile atmosphere, all that good stuff. The pitching staff, outside of the Iglesias stumble on Friday, really kind of stepped up. And so you have to feel better about Atlanta's ability. Correct, you don't have to. A lot of people don't. But I personally think, okay, we have proof of concept of Atlanta being able to get it done in October. I'm not like, this is not the same version of the Yankees that have the best odds to win the World Series in the American League because they're missing Aaron Judge, they're missing Cody Bellinger. But it's still a talented team, right? Luis Garcia, they added him at the deadline. Heliot Ramos added him at the deadline. Jazz Chisholm's still there. Ben Rice has been amazing all season. Like, Ben Rice's OPS is like right at 900. You know, it's still a good team. And again, you can feel good or bad about this. Atlanta was in a position to win all three. It took some fluky stuff for them to lose the first two games, right? It took the out at third base, which in retrospect, Ozzie committed to third a little bit too early. He committed the third before the throw home was made. I guess he assumed that the throw was going to go to get Drake Baldwin at the plate. And because it's a catcher running, Baldwin was not able to score before Ozzie was tagged out. It was overturned on review. And then Iglesias blowing the save in the ninth, which, again, he's been one of the most reliable relievers in baseball in the last couple seasons. Part of this was a throwing error on his part. It was a swinging bunt that he threw away trying to throw to first base off balance. He should have just ate it. But then he gave up an RBI double. And it was a changeup that caught too much of the zone. And then he gave up an RBI single. And it was a changeup that caught too much of the zone. They went to Dylan Dodd with 2 outs in the ninth to just try to get out of the inning because there was runners on second and third. No, I'm sorry, they loaded the bases. They loaded the base, right? Because Heliot Ramos got hit by a pitch to load the bases. They go to Dylan Dodd, he gets the ground out. That's right. So, a lot of, a sequence, two things that don't typically happen for the Braves. Ozzie always getting thrown out at third, and Iglesias blowing a save. And then game 2, you had the weird balk call, which really just threw off the vibes of the entire inning. You could tell that Chris Sale was a little bit, I'm not going to say he was shook by that, but it did throw him off. There obviously was a long shouting match. Walt Weiss got ejected. And fun fact, Chris Sale got ejected on Sunday before the game even started because when the umpires walked out, he started chirping at the home plate umpire who called the balk on Saturday, and he got run on Sunday before the game even started. But weird things. So, one way to look at this is they were in a position to win all three. The other way to look at this is they didn't win all three, and they only won one. And if this was a wild card series, you'd have been home already. And I think this kind of shows for Atlanta, this shows the randomness and the flukiness of the postseason. I say this a lot. If you play if you play this series 100 times, Atlanta probably wins 2 out of 3 more often than not. But at the same time, that's postseason baseball. It's small samples. It's fluky. One weird bounce, one kind of unexpected call can turn a game, which in a small sample, in a best of 3, can turn an entire series. And so that's why I think it's very important that the Braves need to get that bye. They are currently in possession of a bye, of the number 2 seed, which means they would get a bye through the wild card round, and they would make their postseason debut in the NLDS. And I think that this series has shown, you don't want to face anybody in a best of 3. The 3 playoff teams as of Sunday night are the Phillies in the final. They're 1 game out of losing a playoff spot. That's how rough the Phillies season has been. The Phillies, the Diamondbacks, and the Cubs. And so if you are the 3 seed, right now, the playoff matchups would be Cubs versus Diamondbacks. and I think Chicago's home, and the Phillies would go to LA and take on the Dodgers. So if you end up falling behind LA and they end up taking that number 2 spot, you would be facing Philly or San Diego or whatever team just barely gets it. I feel like it's a 4-team race for the 3 wildcard spots. Right, but right behind them, you skip a couple games back to get to Miami and St. Louis and Washington. I feel like it's down to Cubs, Diamondbacks, Phillies, Padres, and one team's going to be left out. And let's all hope it's the Phillies. This is why getting the bye is important. This is why the regular season's going to matter, and Atlanta needs to get that number 2 seed. In just a minute, I want to talk about the offense in this series, because I don't know how sustainable some of what you did is, and I'm trying to figure out, should we be concerned about the offense? We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. My friend Jake over at Locked On Braves got home from vacation in time to put out a show on Sunday night. And one of the points that he made was Atlanta's offense failed the test. And I think he made a good point that excluding the extra innings on Sunday, because extra innings, you kind of have an advantage of the runner on second already. 4 of the 7 runs Atlanta scored were on home runs. And in a postseason type environment, which this is the first real postseason feel of a series. You faced good teams this year. You faced the Dodgers, you faced the Brewers. You beat them both, by the way. But this is the first postseason type series that you played this season. The Braves weren't able to manufacture a lot of runs, right? They weren't able to go out and get guys over, get them in, do all of that stuff, string together multiple hits. And in some ways, I feel like that's what you should probably expect to be the case in the postseason. Is it's tougher to do that. It's tougher to face elite pitching. They faced Max Fried, Garrett Cole, and Cam Schlittler. I am not surprised that most of their runs came via homer. But at the same time, again, they had 6 hits with runners in scoring position all weekend, and they scored 7 runs in regulation. And at a certain point, you have to wonder where all of the other things are, right? Where is where are the hit and runs? I feel like they've tried to do a little bit of that recently, and for the most part, it hasn't worked out. We saw an inning end on a Dom Smith strikeout. Michael Harris caught stealing at second on Sunday. Like the extra innings, like Michael Harris scored the run, and then the very next batter behind, not the very next batter because Ozzie was out. The batter after that, strike him out, throw him out, double play, inning over. Dom Smith went 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts on Sunday. Still don't understand why we're not using Sean Murphy more than Dom Smith, but whatever. Anyway, we're not seeing the stolen bases. And I don't want to bring back all of the pickoffs we had early in the year, right? But other than Austin Riley, nobody's really picked up this Antoine Richardson system. And I feel like in the postseason, all of those little things matter, right? The clean defense, I think, is incredibly important. And Atlanta, for the most part, outside of a little bit of like blips here and there, Atlanta has been playing clean defense all year. It's been a strength for them. But the base running matters. Taking the extra base, they've been good at doing that. Advancing the trail runner, they've been really good at that when they were awful last year. But stolen bases haven't really been a part of the game. Hit and runs haven't really been something that they've done. I'm not a fan of bunting, but I do think at times it could have utility. And I think part of it is I just don't know what the roster composition is going to be. Mauricio Dubon, if I remember right, I think he played 1 game in this series. No, he played 2. He started in center field in game 1 and left field in game 2. He sat out of game 3. But he's one of the team's best hitters in those clutch situations. using the definition of clutch and not just kind of throwing out the vibes of what clutch hitting is. And what Fangraphs defines as high leverage situations, Mauricio Dubon has a 165 WRC plus this year. I mean, you can't ask for much more than the dude that's hitting 368 with a 405 on base and a 579 slug in those situations. Mike Yastrzemski's at a 141, Matt Olson's at a 140, Ozzie Albies is a 134. Everybody else is below average. Drake Baldwin's below average. Ronald Acuna Jr. is below average. Michael Harris is below average. Austin Riley's below average. You have 4 guys that are producing in those high leverage moments. And I feel like you saw a little bit of that in this series. Drake Baldwin had moments when he wasn't that great in a high leverage spot. And so I don't know if I completely agree with Jake's premise that they failed the test, but I do think that we saw less success than I would have liked. I will say Ronald had a couple good at-bats in some of those situations. Fouling, and he had a fantastic at-bat on Saturday. An 11-pitch at-bat in the 8th inning, maybe one of the best at-bats of the year by any Braves hitter. And this was a problem all weekend. He quickly gets down 0-2 on two called strikes. That was a problem for the Braves all weekend. Then he takes 2 balls. He takes a 4-seamer out of the zone and a splitter out of the zone. And at that point, he fouls off some really good pitches that are close to the zone that you have to protect on, especially because I think at the time we were out of challenges maybe. But I mean, there was sliders in. There was a 4-seamer that was dotted like knee high on the black inside that he went and got. There was a splitter outside that was just off the edge of the plate that he fouled off. He took a slider that got out of Brent Hedrick's hand. This is against a lefty, by the way. And then he got a mistake pitch and he launched it for a home run. Amazing at bat from Ronald in a high leverage spot. And I genuinely do think that it's a sign. We've seen now a couple positive signs from Ronald that he's starting to come around. And so hopefully he can get out of that he's been poor in leverage situations rut through having some good at-bats in those situations and start to produce. But I think the big takeaway I had from the weekend is against some of the best pitchers you're going to face. I mean, this was I'd put this 3 up with any other team's top 3 in the postseason. I mean, you could name 3 LA pitchers. I guess you probably would go with Skubal, Snell, and like Glasnow or Yamamoto. I think these 3 are right there with them. Right? Philly having Wheeler and Sanchez and Luzardo. I think these 3 are right up there with them. And you saw some of Atlanta's stars have big weekends. You saw Matt Olson have a big weekend. But it was mostly the homers, and you didn't get enough out of the rest of the roster. And so again, I'm not going to say you failed the test, but you didn't do that great on it. And the pitching stepped up. The pitching staff, outside of Iglesias' 9th inning, the pitching staff absolutely stepped up on the weekend. The offense didn't. And I think that's what you've got to work out. Now, can you optimize the offense a little bit more? Yes, you can. I don't think Dom Smith needs to be in there. I've said it now. I feel like it's a broken record at this point. But Dom Smith probably does not need to be in your lineup anymore. But outside of him, the roster is the roster. The guys you have are the guys you're going to have. Which, by the way, the Braves released Jorge Mateo on Sunday. He cleared waivers, and they released him, so he's now a free agent. Maybe they try to bring him back to Gwinnett, but I feel like if they wanted to bring him back, they would have outrighted him and made him elect free agency versus releasing him outright. So we'll see if he goes and shops around for a major league job to try and be with a contender. And if not, maybe they bring him back on a minor league deal. Who knows? I think I need to see more consistency out of the offense. And I think it needs to be some of these guys that are outside of your Acuna, your Olsen, your Harris group. We got to see more out of those guys, right? That bottom 4 in the order. Your Jarvis. I think Riley had a decent weekend. He's coming out of his funk, knock on wood. Yastrzemski, Dom, like that whole group. I think you need to see more. But I'm still encouraged by how it went. Again, you were in all 3 games. You play them 100 times, you probably win the series. But at the same time, your margin for error is slim. Because you had a fluky thing or two happen on Friday. You had a fluky thing happen on Saturday, and before we realized it, you would have been out in the wild card. So let me know what you think. Are you more or less encouraged by the way the weekend went in New York? Because I can't figure out which one I am. I think in the end of the day, I'm like, you were in all of the games, but you can't count on the randomness evening out in a short series. And so I think I'm a little bit, not discouraged, but just kind of resigned to the fact that we can't predict what's going to happen. There's going to be, such a small sample size, and one little bounce can change things so much that I think it's almost kind of futile to say definitively like the Braves are or are not going to advance. I think people who are just insistent that the Braves are going to get eliminated in the first round, I think it's a very reductive way of looking at things. And also, what a weird way to to talk about the team that you're a fan of. I at least want to believe there's some hope, but maybe I'm just built different. That'll do it for Braves Today for Monday, August 10th. Please like the video. Please subscribe both here and on BravesToday.com. I'm kind of proud of that Dylan Dodd piece. And I'm kind of proud of that Alex Anthopoulos piece from last Friday. So go check both of those out. Again, BravesToday.com. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.